Hey guys, this is Miss Fear trying to be 21st century. I'm going to put this video of the notes online in case it snows, so you can watch this in the confines of your own bed if you want to in your pajamas, which would be really nice. But I'm going to go over the notes to our next unit. We've been doing some different things. We really haven't gotten into literature, so we are going to start our first unit talking about Gilgamesh, which is the first text we are going to read. So I'm going to start this PowerPoint here, and you should have fill-in notes. Hopefully it'll make it interesting to fill in as you go. So, as this is world literature, we are going to study stories from all over the world. So I want to start with a world map, and I want to zero in or zoom in on the Middle East because that's the first story that we're going to read. We're going to read a text called Gilgamesh, which is actually the oldest piece of literature that we know of. Dates way further back than even the Bible. And so that in itself is pretty cool, but the place where Gilgamesh originated is in present-day Iraq. If you remember from last year in world history as freshmen, you probably talked about Mesopotamia. And the word Mesopotamia means the land between two rivers. So if you look in this first picture here, you see two rivers. You see the Tigris River and the Euphrates River. And the land right there in the middle is known as ancient Mesopotamia, and a lot of cool stuff came from this region. I mean, it's known as the cradle of civilization, the birth of life. So it's really, really cool, and it's mentioned a lot in like the Christian Bible and even other religious texts. It is where present-day Iraq is, so it's a little hard for outsiders to get in there and explore today with all the political unrest and the wars, conflicts going on. But one thing to know about the culture of ancient Mesopotamia is that they believed in a lot of different gods. It was a polytheistic religion, which, we're kind of familiar with Greek mythology and all the different gods like Zeus and Aphrodite and there's all kinds of gods, but you growing up have read several stories about that. You probably haven't read a lot of ancient Mesopotamian literature, probably because not a whole lot survives, but one thing that does survive is Gilgamesh. So just to give you some idea about the gods and goddesses and the mythological creatures in this time period that people actually believed in and worshipped, and we see it in literature. We have Anu, who is the father of the gods. He's comparative to Zeus. Aruru, which is a woman, a goddess of creation, kind of comparative to Aphrodite. Or as some people pronounce Ea, is the god of fresh water. Ea likes humans. Kind of like in Greek mythology, you have gods who like humans and gods who try to get in humans' way and destroy humans. Humbaba, these names are really fun to pronounce. Humbaba is not a god, but it's a mythological creature who was said to guard the cedar forest. And he was a ferocious looking thing, and we're going to talk more about him later as we get into Gilgamesh. We also have Scorpion Man, who is this guardian. He has a wife, and he guards these twin mountains. This story reminds me a lot of Lord of the Rings, because as they travel through like the mountain passes in the forest, they encounter these mythological creatures. And it's the same with Gilgamesh. We're going to talk a lot about, actually in just a minute, about the epic journey and how these heroes go on these epic journeys and travel all over the world and then across universes. And so there's a lot of similarities in these stories, and Gilgamesh is the first epic that we know of. So it kind of set the tone, which is pretty cool. Siduri is my favorite character. She is this goddess of wine making, brewing. You can imagine what kind of life she leads if she's the goddess of wine. She lives on the beach. She's very beautiful. Kind of my hero a little bit. Sit by the beach and just have a wonderful life. And Gilgamesh will encounter Siduri, so we will meet her as we read the story. Enlil is kind of a bad god. He's the god of earth, wind, and air, and he does not like people. He does not like humans, so he will present a problem, a conflict to Gilgamesh. And then Ishtar is briefly mentioned in the story. He is or she is the goddess of love and fertility, also the goddess of war. And then Shamash is mentioned, just as another god. He is the sun god. And I just wanted to show you that because, it's kind of cool to look into other cultures and see their religions and just how things have changed over time. But, the reason that I teach Gilgamesh, and I think that it's a worthy text to teach in world literature, is because it is the very oldest piece of literature ever that we know of. So old, in fact, that it was transcribed onto clay tablets, which we can see here. It dates to 612 BC, but actually, I think that was more or less when... I'm a little unsure about these dates. I need to go back and look at it. But it said that it's inscribed on the clay tablets in the Sumerian language before 2000 BC. So it's very, very, very old. People couldn't really translate it until they discovered the Rosetta Stone, and they were able to translate these ancient languages. So for a long time, we just had these tablets and didn't know what they were or what they said. It is a very long poem. It's written in a poetic genre, and it was found in the ruins of the library of Assurbanipal, who was the king of the Assyrian Empire. And it was written in Akkadian, which was a Babylonian language, and it was spread out on the course over 11 clay tablets. We're a little unsure as to the author, but a lot of scholars believe that this person here is the author, and I'm not going to try to butcher this name because I know I will say it incorrectly. But a lot of scholars believe that this is the author. And then these clay tablets were actually found by a British man named Austin Henry Layard, and he found 25,000 broken clay tablets from this ruins of this ancient library in 1839. And again, it took a while to translate because we didn't have the Rosetta Stone to help us. But I can just imagine him unearthing 25,000 clay tablets, and just what a neat discovery. But Gilgamesh was part of that. So who is Gilgamesh? It's a funny name. You may have heard of it. You may not have. I was watching Jeopardy like a couple years ago, and Gilgamesh popped up on Jeopardy. But he's our hero in this story, but he's also a historical figure. He actually existed. And what we know about him, what scholars know about Gilgamesh, is that he was an actual king who reigned over the Sumerian city-state of Uruk around 2700 BC. Uruk. That sounds a lot like Iraq. And so, not much has changed over the name of the land. But it is present-day Iraq, so that would explain why Uruk sounds so similar. He was a popular king. Long after his death, people still worshipped him. He's known to be this great warrior, leading the city-state in great victories. He built this massive city. He's widely celebrated for his wisdom. He was very, very popular. And he's actually mentioned a few times in the Christian Bible. He is called Erich in the Bible, or actually Uruk, that the city is referred to. And it is known in the Bible as one of the great cities of ancient Mesopotamia. The historical king Gilgamesh is probably credited for making it such a great city. He is known to raise the walls, and scholars, archaeologists determined that it had a perimeter of 6 miles, which if you think about the lack of engineering and technology and productivity that they had in this time period, that is a pretty impressive fact that he was able to build this huge city. And again, if you're interested, today its ruins rest near the town of Warka in Iraq, which is in the south of Iraq. Not too far from Baghdad. Says a team of German archaeologists recently announced that they had detected a buried structure that might be Gilgamesh's tomb. And, you know, it's always been a little problematic to try to travel to these areas with such conflict and war. The military actions of 2003 stopped their work before they could really determine if it was in fact Gilgamesh, but probably was his tomb, which would be really cool. So, Gilgamesh, the character, we talked about the real Gilgamesh, what little we know about him, but Gilgamesh, the character in literature, is a little bit different. He is said to be 2 parts God and 1 part human, which mathematically, biologically, I'm not too sure how that works, but we're just going to go with it because that's what the literature says. In the first half of the story, which we are not going to read, we're only going to read an excerpt of this story. But in the first half of the story, he explores his godlike side. He's like, man, I'm a god. I'm superhuman. I can't die. I'm really, really awesome. And so he's very arrogant, which we see a lot of that in epic stories with the hero and how they struggle with arrogance. And it's called a tragic flaw. It's called hubris. It means they're really cocky. Even though he is part God and he has superhuman powers, he does have his flaws. He is arrogant, he's very boastful, he's selfish, he's destructive, and we're going to see bits of that as we start the story. The second half, though, which is where a lot can be learned, and it's the part that we are going to read in class. Gilgamesh explores his human side. He accepts that, he's not a complete god. He is not a god. He is part mortal. And so he has to face unexpected limitations of that side of him. So that's the interesting part. And that's my introduction on Gilgamesh. Now, I like Gilgamesh for a lot of reasons. It really sparks interesting discussion and it's still relevant today, and I think that is cool because this is, almost 3,000, no, it's like almost 6,000 years old, and the questions, the things that the people struggle with in this culture that seem so unrelatable actually can be related to us today. And so before we get to that, though, we're going to talk more about that in class, but here's just the thought. Who do you think is the most famous person in the world? Right now, like today. And I want you to think about this person and the character of this person. So, what are the good qualities that he or she has? What are the best or what are the bad? Why is this person even famous? How did they become famous? And do they deserve that fame? Are they worthy of that fame? So I thought about this, and here's who I came up with as to the most famous people in our culture today. Well, I'm gonna get there in just a minute. Before we talk about that, I want to introduce again what an epic is. Hopefully you talked about this last year. Maybe you read the Iliad or the Odyssey. But we are going to talk more about the epic in this class. An epic is a long narrative poem, and it does celebrate a hero. And it's interesting about epics, especially ancient texts, is that for a long time they weren't written down. They weren't recorded on those clay tablets initially. What happened was they were told. They were stories that they were told orally. And so we had these people named Shops. I know it looks like Scops, but it's pronounced Shops. And or bards, and they were poets, and they were really, really good entertainers. They would stand in the middle of a big, it wasn't really an auditorium, but a stage, so to speak, and they would recite these poems that told stories, and they were really cool. And what they would do to engage the audience is they would use repetition of words and phrases and lines, almost like a song. You know how a song has a chorus that repeats itself. And so that would really draw the audience in. And the alliteration would help them remember the poem as well as bring in and engage the audience. So, what are the characteristics of an epic? I mentioned earlier that, we have these ancient epics like Gilgamesh and the Odyssey and the Iliad. and Beowulf, and there's all kinds of ancient epics. But there's modern day epics too. There's Lord of the Rings. There's Harry Potter, Star Wars. Any story where a hero travels across this long setting to find something, and so all of these things have similarities. And so here are the characteristics of an epic. Classic definition is that it's a poem. And Star Wars, Harry Potter, those aren't poems. But ancient epics were long narrative poems, poems that tell stories. And usually it has like a third person speaker. The narrator is telling the story. Now, an epic can have comedic elements. It can be a little bit funny, but for the most part, it's very serious because the theme, the lesson to be learned in an epic, is very, very important for the readers to learn as well. The setting is so huge. It can be the sea, a region, the world, or an entire universe, which Star Wars would, kind of take that. Now, this is what interests me. The traits of the hero reflect the morals of his or her society. So if the hero is greedy but strong, then that would kind of reflect that culture values strength. Maybe you can be a little arrogant, but that doesn't really matter because strength is more important. So it's interesting to examine what type of person the hero is. And that would be reflective of that culture at the time. Obviously, the main character is a hero. The action typically includes superhuman deeds. The hero is not like magical where they have magical powers, but they could be really, really strong or really, really fast. Typically, the hero has a goal, some kind of purpose that's driving him, and usually it is a him. And so that kind of sparks this long journey. And this journey is going to test the hero, test his wits, strength, or bravery. Typically, part of the action would be gods or supernatural beings. And then the overall purpose of an epic is not only to entertain, because it's certainly action-packed, it's suspenseful, so it's entertaining, but it's to teach and inspire the reader. And that kind of goes back up to the third bullet about the theme being very important, because there's always a lesson to be learned in an epic. All right, so I started this a minute ago, but since Gilgamesh is based on the characteristics that the ancient Mesopotamian people valued, qualities like being very strong, brave, heroic, a great warrior, even clever, I just thought it would be interesting to think about famous people in our culture today and what that says about our society. So let's see who we nominate as famous and worthy of recognition. Oh my. So we have the Kardashians, and I just want you to think about why they are famous. What have they done to deserve fame? What qualities do they have? What is it about them that make them famous in our society today? In my opinion, it's a little depressing to think that our society values the type of values that they have. So, but it's interesting to think that our culture, values this type of fame. Okay, moving on. Oh, Justin Bieber, with purple hair, I might add. So again, why is Justin Bieber famous? What is it about him that our society values? I think, physical appearance, not too shabby. I'm not crazy about the purple hair, but that's just my opinion. Talent. Some might argue that he's very talented musically. Some may argue that he's not. But again, what is it about Justin Bieber that makes him so famous? Leo. He's looking a little older. Leo was kind of a heartthrob when I was growing up. But what makes somebody like Leonardo DiCaprio famous? You might argue, again, physical appearances. Talent is there. He's a very talented actor. Charitable. So these are more, these are better qualities in our society, I think. Oh, Cam. We value, I think, a lot in our society athletes. And some well deserving, some, might not be as deserving. There's a lot to be said about Cam Newton. Physically, athletically, you could argue that he's a good role model. He's certainly very charitable. He visits lots of, children's hospitals and does a lot for the community. You can also see he's not a good role model. Super Bowl pouting incident might be an example of that, but he's definitely very famous. And so it's interesting to think about why he's famous. What qualities does he have that makes him a hero in our society? Oh, 1D. I should have put more girls. Sorry, boys. I'm putting a lot of boys up here. What qualities make them? They're fun, vivacious. I guess they don't exist anymore since they broke up not long ago. But, it's just interesting. I want you to think about why people are famous in our society. And to kind of get away from, the teeny bopper type people, Oprah. She's very, very famous in our society. A lot of you guys in your culture projects put Oprah down as one of the notables in American culture. So, what is it about Oprah that makes her very famous? Charitable. So, there's plenty of others. So, the overall question that I want to end with is, what does it take for someone to receive fame in our society today? That's the overall question. Because if we can think about fame in our society, then it's going to make reading Gilgamesh a lot more interesting, because as we examine Gilgamesh as a hero and look at his qualities, what makes him so good and well loved in that society, we can really gain a lot better insight into the ancient Mesopotamian society. And my presentation. My gosh, there's my face. All right, well, hopefully that wasn't so bad. And my hope is that you're out, you had a good day out in the snow and now you're cuddled up in bed. Yeah. But we are going to end it there, and I will see you when I see you.